Shortly before 5 o'clock on the evening of the 2nd of February this year, two bright and slow-moving lights were seen travelling at low altitude over three major cities in northern England. We have exclusive interviews with some of the hundreds of eyewitnesses who observed the lights, each of whom insist they were not attached to any conventional aircraft, helicopter or microlight. Among the witnesses was one man who thankfully had the quick presence of mind to record the lights on videotape as they passed directly over his home. We include exclusive footage of our visit to Leeds and Bradford International Airport, where senior air traffic controllers and officials extended us unprecedented cooperation in a combined effort to identify the mystery lights. Later we feature exclusive interviews with several leading UFO researchers, among them best-selling author Timothy Good, speaking candidly about his latest book, Alien Base. And while attending this year's International UFO Congress in Nevada, we caught up with Mexico's Jaime Maussan. What did he make of the amazing UFO footage filmed over Mexico City on the 6th of August last year? Jim De La Toso, head of Village Labs in America, comments about the techniques used to analyze the Mexican footage, as well as the mysterious lights that appeared over Phoenix, Arizona last year. We also include brief segments of an exclusive interview with former US military combat man John Vasquez, who describes how an entire battalion of some 1,300 men were abducted in September 1977. Elsewhere we visit Area 51 in Nevada, claimed by some to house back-engineered alien technology, and stumble across security guards who take more than a passing interest in our presence. And we look at high-performance military jets, seen darting across the skies at Rachel, home of course to the world-famous Little Alien. And the hit movie Deep Impact illustrated what might happen should a meteor strike the Earth, but here at Meteor Crater in Arizona, it's clear that the threat from rogue asteroids is very real. Last but not least, we take a look at some new UFO footage gleaned from home and abroad. Are these elusive images of extraterrestrial craft, or might they have a more prosaic explanation? Finally, film and photo analyst Russell Callahan puts a sequence of film footage taken by George Adamski almost 40 years ago under the computer microscope and comes up with some surprising results. This, and much more besides, is contained in Volume 2 of UFOs Hard Evidence. Shortly before 5 p.m. on Monday evening, the 2nd of February, independent record producer Stephen Clark and his wife watched in awe as two very bright, white lights appeared dangerously low overhead. They and many other witnesses in and around Manchester, northern England, thought they must belong to an aircraft in imminent danger of crashing. But then, one of the lights was seen to jump over the other, before disappearing out of sight to the east. The mystery lights travelled slowly across the Pennines, a range of high peaks and moorland that border the counties of Lancashire and Yorkshire. Among the first witnesses to observe the lights as they entered populated areas of Yorkshire were Mr. and Mrs. John Wilson. They were out walking in fields, close to their home in Gummersall, when the lights suddenly appeared from the west. So what was it about the lights that prompted you to focus on them a little bit more than you would do, say, where it were an aircraft?
I would say three things really. Basically it was the brightness of the lights. Landing lights have rays, which like a car light you can see them pointing forward. There's no rays, just two bright lights. They were close together, which again to me ruled out military aircraft, because military aircraft, from my experience, do not fly in formation at night time for safety reasons. And secondly, the lights were staggered. They weren't parallel. They had one above the other, close together, which would indicate to me two craft flying very close together.
Did either of you hear any noise at all?
None whatsoever. And I've got quite sharp hearing.
Now the reason for that is, I think, if they were making a humming noise, we have the motorway just on the top of the hill, which is a constant humming noise. And that time of night, of course, there's a lot of traffic around. We have the Bradford Road down here too, so there's noise from both directions. That may have eliminated any noise that was there.
Now, you've mentioned that the flight of these lights was staggered. They had this intensity about them without giving off a beam. Was there any other curious feature that distinguished them from, say, normal aircraft?
The thing that impressed us most is the fact it was so intensely dark. There's no reflection from them. There's no possibility of getting it a shape, a distinction. But I definitely think there's two craft.
After travelling over the towns of Halifax, Cleckheaton and the city of Bradford, the two, and as yet unidentified mystery lights, began to mesmerise the citizens of Leeds, Britain's third largest city. Paul Stevens saw the lights from a moving vehicle and describes what attracted him to them in the first place.
It was a strange one, mainly because it was such a clear evening. There was no clouds in the sky at all. There's obviously quite a few planes that travel over here, but they were just very slow moving. They didn't move around at all. They stuck together all the time, and it was just so strange watching them, how slow they were moving across. It was as if they weren't moving, if you know what I mean. It was just sort of like travelling so slowly, and they just never fluctuated away from each other. They always stayed tight, you know, the same distance apart, and just were just moving, and it was quite weird just watching them, really. You could tell that weren't aircraft lights as what I know anyway. I'm not very good at telling the distance or anything like that, but I would say they were quite low down, but they were certainly behind the towers. They weren't directly above, because I could still see them as I was travelling up, although I was straining behind rather than looking straight backwards, if you know what I mean. I wasn't sort of like looking just straight at the side. I was having to turn my back and see them, and then it was just as if they disappeared. I didn't see them move away, and I didn't see them sort of like just disappear. They actually just moved away, and then I think it must have been that my sighting was gone then, really. I had a look when I got right to the top of Cherwell, because you see quite a good distance across, and I didn't see anything after that.
But you're fairly convinced that they weren't your standard lights attached to an aircraft?
Oh, definitely. I would say quite 99.9% certain they weren't actually lights attached to a normal everyday craft, certainly not.
Hundreds of Leeds residents observed the lights over the city that evening, all within the space of 15 minutes, timed at between 5:30 and 5:45 p.m. Housewife Pamela Hines and her 13-year-old daughter Charlotte were out walking near their Cookridge home, north of the city, when the lights appeared.
We were coming home from the vets. It must have been about, his appointment was 5:30, so it must have been about 5:40, 5:45. Coming up Tinshill Lane, and we just happened to look across our right shoulder, and I said to Charlotte, I said, oh gosh, that's low, it's going to crash. But then as these lights got closer, it couldn't possibly have been a plane. They were too close together, too big. The best way I described them were glaring headlights, but big in the sky. Not very, just above house level. Too low to have been a plane. So, I said to Charlotte, I said, oh, it's aliens, Charlotte, you know, so which she grabbed my arm and says, oh, don't, Mum, you know.
How old is your daughter?
She's 13. But I said, oh, wave to them, you know, they're only friendly, like, so we were waving and having a laugh. And we watched them go across, extremely slow. Extremely slow. Couldn't see anything else or hear anything. Just big, white, glaring, like headlamps, like I say. Just went across, and then we carried on walking, and as we glanced then across our left shoulder, I couldn't see them anymore. They'd disappeared. And it was a bit eerie, yeah.
A key witness to this incident was Mr. Ken Field, who on seeing the lights had the quick presence of mind to run indoors and briefly record them on his camcorder before the battery failed.
22 seconds was all the time I had to video it. But having said that, I mean, probably, maybe, yes, I did see him for a minute and a half or so. But we are somewhat restricted here with the elevation to the houses and the trees.
Yeah, we can actually hear an aircraft going overhead right now.
That's right. Over there it is.
Yes, now, you are familiar, I would take it, with normal aircraft that come into Leeds Bradford Airport.
Yeah.
Have you ever, or your wife ever, seen any lights like this before?
Never. If I had done, I wouldn't have bothered getting the video camera out. It was because it didn't fit into any pattern that we got the video camera out. I could see the strobe lights because I'm looking through the video on magnification, but I didn't see any strobe lights as they were approaching. So the only time I've seen them is on magnification on the film. You should be getting exactly the same sort of background noise as we were getting. But when I listened to the tape afterwards myself, there is a Doppler effect on it. You can hear it actually going away. So it's got to be something associated with those two objects, whatever they were.
Despite being observed by hundreds, if not thousands of eyewitnesses, these videotape images are possibly the best evidence yet that the lights were real and not figments of people's imagination. Curiously, few of the witnesses described seeing strobe lights, but as these slow-motion frames clearly demonstrate, strobes were in evidence. Some researchers have speculated that the lights belonged to secret military unmanned reconnaissance drones, or were attached to two microlights whose properties made them invisible to radar. But the eyewitness testimony of Stephen and Joe Peace cast considerable doubt on these explanations.
I suppose it's increasingly we began to question what it was. We're saying, are there a couple of stars we've never noticed before and things like that.
Joe, whereabouts were you?
We were out walking the dog out on Roundy Golf Course. So we walked sort of down one fairway, up the other fairway, back down the original fairway, and these lights were still there. I can only describe them, you know, if you're standing in front of a plane as it's coming into land and you've got like plane headlights, and it looked like that, but they just never moved, absolutely still for at least 5 minutes.
And whilst we said they were stationary for all that time, as we got closer and closer, they suddenly moved, and they were one behind the other at that time, rather than side by side, but when they were moving, one in front of the other, and again, I've not seen aircraft like that. They're normally side by side as they move. They also, I mean, the speed they go across the sky as well was surprising, you know. I mean, no noise, or very, very faint noise. So, you know, the only thing you could liken the lights to is like when you see a helicopter hovering, but then there were two of them, and they suddenly moved at a speed that a helicopter didn't move on. No helicopter I've ever seen.
What you're basically saying is that these lights separated.
They did. They started, as Steve said, when they started to move, they came almost over the top of our heads, one in front of the other, and as they passed over us, one of them carried on straight ahead and one of them went almost at right angles off left to the first one, very quickly.
When you say very quickly, have you got any idea at all to draw a comparison?
You can't put a speed on it. I mean, I'm not technically minded enough to put an actual speed on it, but we've all watched aircraft move across the sky, and they seem to be moving very slowly, don't they, when they move across a big horizon. These went from where we were, one went in the direction of Harrogate and one went in the direction of Garforth, and in seconds almost they were on the horizon in different directions. Now that's quicker than I've ever seen anything move. All I can say for certain is it's nothing I've ever seen before and nothing that I can explain. I mean, I think if you are a skeptic, you try to explain it to yourself, and I'm saying, well, there was some conflict in Iraq stirring up again, you know, is it some sort of stealth fighter or something? But the way it split from almost, it looked like one thing to two suddenly, I can't explain it. So I think people have to draw their own conclusions. I won't be sceptical anymore, I don't think.
Joe?
I wouldn't have a clue what it is. I mean, we've seen the traffic helicopter and the light from that regularly. The noise with that, it just wasn't that. And I've seen reports that suggest it was microlights, and I've also heard microlights, and it certainly wasn't microlights. Wouldn't like to say.
Clearly the two lights were seen to separate and go their different ways. But of far greater significance, perhaps, is that they did so at speeds far in excess of what one might expect from jet aircraft, let alone unpiloted drones or microlights. A few hours later on the night in question, it's possible that the lights may have returned, to reappear over Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. Chris Duffield certainly saw something strange that evening.
So we see a lot of lights at night, which are usually sort of civilian aircraft or commercial jets, and a lot of military craft as well. And of course we don't bat an eyelid, but on this particular occasion we did. It ended up being lasting about 3 minutes, with an object appearing over the horizon in the distance. There were two white lights with a fair distance separating them, which seemed to be hovering on the horizon. And so because they maintained that position for quite a while, I decided to get my binoculars out. And they seemed to appear at a very slow rate and ever so slightly get bigger, but all of a sudden a red light appeared, and at this point I was looking through binoculars, and this red light slowly began to rise above and between the other two lights to form a triangle. And at this point the whole object had got quite a lot bigger and had begun to turn, and as it tilted, this third red light actually rotated with all the other two, as if they were on fixed points on a triangle, and then they eventually kind of levelled out and it disappeared back almost the way it came.
Not long after the 2nd of February incident, press inquiries were made to senior aviation officials at Leeds Bradford International Airport. The media, like us, wanted to know whether the two objects had been detected on radar, and if so, what did they make of them? After the incident had featured on a regional BBC television news programme, Andy Rackham, Airfield Services Manager, received over 200 calls from eyewitnesses. Mr. Rackham told journalists that he had retrieved the radar tape for the evening in question, but upon thorough examination could find no trace whatsoever of the two mystery objects. However, in an unprecedented move, he extended an official invitation for us to visit the airport to discuss the matter further. Together with Peter Buller, Air Traffic Supervisor at Leeds Bradford Airport, that meeting took place on the 19th of March. These exclusive pictures were taken during our visit. First, Andy Rackham explained his involvement in the affair.
We had an event on the 2nd of February that was brought to our attention by the press. It's obviously an event that a lot of people have seen that cannot be explained. We are not doubting the sincerity of those reports. We are only merely looking at the technical aspects and the flight safety aspects of what was it and did it have an impact on our operations, or could it have an impact in the future. Now, I'm not disputing any of these reports as being made up or fictionary or whatever. I can only give you an assessment of what we've done following an inquiry into those reports. And the inquiry that we've conducted says quite clearly there is no supportive evidence whatsoever from either documentation, our own flights in the area at the time, and our own radar playback information of that particular evening. There is nothing supportive to say that there's anything out of the ordinary. Not that I'm saying, as I did say on the TV thing, I'm not doubting the fact that there could have been something there, but we've nothing to substantiate that.
Peter Buller, Senior Air Traffic Supervisor, then gave us his thoughts on the matter.
I've had a long experience of working in an aviation environment, and have received several UFO reports over many years, despite the fact I've never ever witnessed any of my own. And whilst being at work in an air traffic control environment, and on this particular occasion, although I wasn't actually working, I am aware of the facts that have been reported and the radar recording. And we have nothing at all which we know happened that could explain this event. Every aircraft we were aware of was accounted for, and we know of the reason for this event.
Immediately following this extraordinary meeting, we were taken to the main control tower at Leeds Bradford Airport, which affords a panoramic view of the region from what is the highest elevated airport in Britain. Here, control tower operators were busily engaged in normal air traffic procedures, their eyes fixed firmly on instrument panels and aircraft on or above the runway apron. None were seen staring at the Leeds city centre skyline several miles away in the distance. Safety is obviously of paramount concern to the men and women who run this airport. On a busy day, Leeds Bradford can handle up to 300 takeoff and landing flights, anything from small light aircraft to medium and large-sized passenger jets. Each daily come and go, from the early hours until late into the night. Yet 2 unidentified lights were seen by people entering and leaving their controlled airspace, and although not detected on their radar screens, airport officials were anxious as anyone to investigate the matter further. Here, Andy Rackham views a radar recording taken of air traffic movements on the morning of our visit. He explained that he undertook this same procedure after reports of the mystery lights were first drawn to his attention by the press, but on viewing the tape in question, he could find no trace whatsoever of the lights. Only 10% of people who think they've seen a UFO take the time and trouble to report their sighting. To have as many as 200 people contact Leeds and Bradford International Airport alone is a quite remarkable statistic. The lights of the 2nd of February this year were so extraordinary, so different to those one would normally associate with conventional aircraft, that they prompted people from all walks of life to suddenly stop what they were doing and take a closer look. Ordinary people reporting extraordinary events. Each year, the town of Laughlin in Nevada plays host to the International UFO Congress and Film Convention, where, over the course of 7 days, enthusiasts gather from across the United States and the rest of the world to take in lectures that each cover a wide variety of topics and themes, delivered by some 3 dozen leading international speakers. Held at the Gold River Resort, situated on the banks of the Colorado River, and just some 90 minutes drive from Las Vegas, visitors to the Congress can browse over every conceivable type of UFO-related merchandise. The latest videotape releases, hundreds of new and rare book titles, even alien jewelry. Among the speakers this year was leading Mexican UFO researcher and television presenter Jaime Maussan, who has done more than most to bring to the world's attention striking images of UFOs seen over Mexico and captured on amateur camcorder footage. On the 9th of August last year, Jaime received a videotape sent anonymously in the post. It shows a large, saucer-shaped craft with revolving skirt, making its way slowly across the top of an apartment block in broad daylight. These negative images of the footage, taken allegedly 3 days earlier, assist in highlighting the detail. The cameraman was eventually traced and found to be an alleged illegal immigrant, and understandably he preferred to keep out of the media spotlight. Despite this, some 20 eyewitnesses have come forward to claim they too observed the saucer-shaped craft, but only after the footage was screened on Mexican television in an attempt to identify the precise location of the apartment block in question. We caught up with Jaime Maussan outside the Gold River Hotel on a sun-drenched morning to hear what he made of it all. Jaime, one of the big news-breaking stories from last year, of course, was this incredible footage filmed over Mexico on the 6th of August last year. What can you tell us about recent developments?
Well, we know now that some of the people who was very close to this thing, whatever it was, are now getting really sick, especially a girl, a photographer that was under this thing, and now she's losing hair, she has headaches, almost every day, and she's very sick. And according to her mother, she never got sick before. In the building where this was recorded, the doors are completely closed now. You cannot go in. There is big security there. And we understand now why whoever recorded this doesn't want to come out. The restrictions there are very, very high. Then we still don't know if this is true or not. But the investigations, as I said before, is consistent. And we think it's probably the best video ever taken from a UFO if this is real.
Now, one of the things that impressed me when I saw the presentation in Brasilia last year on this specific case was the credibility of the eyewitnesses who hadn't seen this videotape before, but upon seeing it were absolutely shell-shocked. Yes, they said, this is the same object that we saw. You would rate those witnesses very highly, I take it?
Yeah, especially a girl named Cassandra, because we found her on the street. She hadn't seen the video, and she described exactly the same what we see in that tape. The object, the circling, the color, the area. We found her father, who said that he was sleeping, and she came running into the house asking for him to come out. He didn't want to because he was so tired, and he told her that she was crazy. For me, that's a very credible witness, because it seems that this is a very young, innocent girl who doesn't have anything to do with cover-ups, conspiracy or hoaxes, or to back someone there who's making something that is not true. Then for me, the witnesses are the real key for this video, because now we have the technology to create these kind of things. We have the computers, we have the production effects, the Hollywood effects, if you like, and it's easy to do that. But when you have witnesses, then the story is different. It means that now the investigation, the investigators are playing a most important role into giving the credibility to this phenomenon that by itself is incredible.
Yes. Now, you'll be the guest speaker at the 17th Leeds International Conference in September in England,
of course.
Yes. And many people who will be attending that event will be keen to know precisely what it is that you're going to be showing on that particular weekend.
Well, especially the videos that many Mexicans have been able to record since 1991, when we did it accidentally during a total solar eclipse. From then on, in Mexico, many people have organized, have created groups, and they have taken the most startling videos. I mean, some videos you can see 50, 70, 80, 100 UFOs or lights moving in the sky, making figures. Just last week, and that's the last week in January, we had reports from 3 different cities. In Guadalajara, we had a rain of metal in a diameter of 50 meters. We have metal, hot, very red metal that was falling from the sky. We don't know what happened there. This is being recognized by the authorities, and I am taking all these investigations to the United Kingdom. I think with this we will prove not just that something is happening in Mexico, but that the video is becoming the most important tool for the common citizen around the world to prove what they saw, and to prove that it's real, and to prove this coincidence, the same facts, the same videos everywhere in the world. Now we are having the same kind of videos in England. I think very soon we are going to be very used to that. And something that is going to be very important for you, because we have photographs of the spheres that are being seen around the crop circles in England. If you want to look to them very clearly, shiny, silvery, I'm going to present the pictures, incredible pictures. You can see the clouds, and you can see these balls, you know, making figures there very clearly.
Someone who believed he could shed further light on the Mexican footage was Jim De La Toso, head of Village Labs in Phoenix, Arizona. Although Jim found himself the subject of heated controversy several weeks later, his comments about the techniques used to analyze this and other striking UFO footage make for telling viewing.
Well, we're very diligent about what we do, and we keep refining our techniques, because
there's always someone that points out a potential error or a supposed flaw in what we do, and we've spent a lot of time perfecting the techniques of telling size and distance of structured objects. But when you're dealing with a light in the sky, you have to look at it in a different way. So what we've done is develop a technique to look at the frequency of light, its brightness, and all of its characteristics in a single fingerprint, kind of like a voice print. It's a light print called a sigma. So we have a database of stars, Hale-Bopp, airplane lights, quartz lights, and flares. So we know with precision all of the characteristics of these known objects. So when we start with a video like the Phoenix lights, we take all of the lights that are in that picture, airplane lights, city lights, and the unknowns, and test them, build a database, and then compare it to knowns.
Now, Village Labs and yourself have been also instrumental in taking a detailed examination of the extraordinary footage that came out of Mexico City on the 6th of August last year, courtesy of Jaime Maussan and his team down there. What were your first impressions about that video, and after analysis, what do you now conclude?
Well, when I first looked at it, I thought it was a large object suspended by a helicopter. But upon careful examination, I found no evidence in the vertical interval that it had ever been gen-locked, where it would be a small model that would be dissolved or superimposed. In that case, it would have to hit an editing system or a computer system which would modify the subcarrier. Not information in the picture, but information on the black line in between the picture. Upon analysis of that, it's not a miniature that has been gen-locked and dissolved and overlaid. The clouds and the cloudy day make it suspicious. That will mask elements of overlay. Well, concerning whether it's a large object suspended by a helicopter, when we do a tracing on each frame of the object and take a horizontal line as the center of gravity through it and the crown on the top, call that the fulcrum, and run an imaginary line all the way up into infinity on each frame, if it's suspended by a cable, we will find that the fulcrum meets at an apex up there somewhere. Well, it doesn't meet at an apex. It looks like it's wobbling and could be connected to a center shaft somewhere, but it's not. Second, when it moves, it dips with a mass inertia that is not that of a cable tugging on it. It doesn't move and then wobble back into place to settle. And we studied the edges of it and determined that compared to the edges of other buildings that are in there, that it's a large object.
Among the hundreds of visitors to this year's Congress, we came across leading American abduction researcher Yvonne Smith, who will join with Jaime Maussan at this year's Leeds International Conference. What, we ask, could delegates at Leeds expect to see and hear?
But I've been researching, working with abduction cases now for almost 10 years, and in Leeds I'll be presenting my work, my data, with the cases that I've been working with throughout the United States. The audience will see actual artwork taken from my cases, my caseload. I work with an artist, and I call him my police artist, and he will sit and draw what my clients have described seeing, and I also have the abductees themselves doing the drawings, so they will see beautiful artwork and actual body marks, what kind of alien beings have been described in my cases, and so I think it's gonna be a full show. Hopefully we'll have time for questions and answers, and I may bring a couple of video clips with me.
Another regular visitor to the United Kingdom is American researcher James Courant. He was one of the guest speakers at this year's London conference. James was instrumental in bringing to prominence a certain Dr. Michael Wolff, a controversial figure who claimed he once worked with back-engineered alien technology at Area 51 in Nevada.
Michael Wolf is definitely in the genius category. He's been through some serious debriefing. I have confirmation beyond any reasonable doubt in my mind, based on my sources, that he did work at Area 51, Groom Lake, and also a place called Dulce, New Mexico, which I have been up to Dulce and have checked with some people that would probably have the answers I was looking for, and as far as what I needed to know, I feel it was a secret research base tied in with the U.S. government.
Let me just ask you this. Of all the revelations and claims attached to Dr. Michael Wolf, which do you think is perhaps the most significant claim of all?
That he worked directly with extraterrestrial biological entities. And I would put Michael's interview up. I did an hour-and-a-half interview on video, which wasn't really designed to be shown to the public, but they showed it here. And it was just my little camera being set up, and it was the first interview that he allowed with on video with his face being shown, and he was very cordial about it, and he comes across, I feel, very intelligent and credible. One lady in here was a medical doctor, and she saw the interview and wants to talk to him. She felt he definitely came across as somebody that was very truthful.
Among the visitors to Laughlin, we came across former U.S. military combat man John Vasquez, who describes how an entire battalion of some 1,300 men were abducted in September 1977.
And this is when the captain, our captain of Delta Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Infantry, was walking out from this building to make a speech. And this speech was to advise us of our 6 to 8 weeks training course. And just when he was walking up to this dais of podium to make this speech, I heard this rushing noise.
A rushing noise?
A rushing noise. And I leaned back and I looked across to my left, and I saw this bright light, intense bright light. I thought it was a Jeep or a truck or something, and it was moving across slowly. And I saw some of Charlie Company's men running out of their formation, others were standing still. And I wanted to take a better look at this, so I leaned forward. And when I leaned forward, this bright light just got really close, and it was in between the tree lines, or between the tree lines, and I still thought it was a truck, but the light was really, really intense. I mean, it's white, bright light. And I don't know what happened here, but I went unconscious for a few minutes. And when I came to, I was looking downwards and I couldn't move. I couldn't move my feet. And I tried desperately to move from where I was standing. The next thing I did was I could move my upper body, so I turned to my right, and I saw someone had been running to the tree lines, and others were diving underneath the building into the 2-story high crawl space that you see in the picture. And my buddy, Alan, I think that's his name right now, running. They were all running, so I just cried out for Alan to come back and help me, because I couldn't move. So he came back and pulled me where I was standing, physically pulled me. He just pulled my arm, physically, and I sort of kind of jumped from the position I was standing. And he was asking, he was saying, take cover, and I was asking, what's going on here? You know, something's happening, and it was happening fast.
I understand that you also heard some screams from those members that were still back on the parade ground, some calling for their mothers.
Yes, sir. That part, well, it was right after when Sergeant Santini, we saw him coming out from the first building where me and Alan just crossed, and this ball white light from 50 feet where we were laying down, it looked like the size of a melon, a small melon, cantaloupe. But it was a bright white light, and it wasn't a tracer, because I know I've seen tracers before. I fired in my M16s, and I know what tracers look like. But this wasn't no tracer, because it sort of came from the second story, and it sort of roller coaster down to Sergeant Santini's height, and Sergeant Santini's about 5'11", about 5'11", 6 foot, and he was waving up and down his arms, screaming about what's going on, telling us to take cover, and he was cursing the sky because something was coming down. And he started to run. He disappeared from the second building, and this bright line just sort of roller coaster itself down to his height and zipped across, and it disappeared. And the next thing we heard was a slap and a thump, and one of us, Hackett, crawled over to the other side to see where Sergeant Santini was, and he was out on the pavement. He didn't move, and apparently he was knocked out or something. Something hit him. And when he came back, this is when we started hearing the screaming from Alpha Company all the way down to Bravo, then to Charlie Company, and to Delta. When I came to Delta Company, we heard somebody out in the parade formation screaming for Mommy. And it went a kind of high-pitched scream and down to a Gretland sort of scream, and I could still hear it when I talk about this. And, I mean, you hear a man screaming like that, you know something's going wrong. And I told Jones, who was lying next to me, I told him we should go out there and help these guys because something's going on out there. He just turned around and said, no, they're already dead, forget about it.
The International UFO Congress and Film Convention concludes its week-long series of events with a sparkling evening gala dinner, at which the annual EB Awards, EB stands for Extraterrestrial Biological Entity, are presented to those film and television producers whose latest UFO-related works are judged best among the 7 categories. Approximately 5 hours' drive east of Laughlin and a few miles east of Flagstaff, Arizona, a right-hand turn off the main highway takes you on a smooth, narrow road into flat desert terrain. Every few hundred yards, a signpost gives some indication of what lies ahead. Meteor Crater, formed 49,000 years ago when a giant asteroid weighing millions of tons struck the Earth at an estimated speed of 45,000 miles per hour. It had an explosive force equal to 15 million tons of TNT, and over 300 million tons of rock were immediately displaced. It's difficult to gauge the sheer size of the crater from its rim, but it's 570 feet in depth, nearly a mile across, and over 3 miles in circumference. Inside Meteor Crater's Museum of Astrogeology, visitors can enjoy a self-guided tour of numerous exhibits and video presentations. Meteor Crater was an official NASA-designated training site and used by Apollo astronauts who would later set foot on the Moon. There have been several near misses with rogue asteroids in recent times, but were one to strike the Earth with a force equal to that which struck this part of Arizona all those years ago, the consequences would be too dreadful to contemplate. First-time visitors to the International UFO Congress often use the occasion to spend a day visiting a region of Nevada that has become a part of UFO folklore. It is, of course, Area 51. The drive to Area 51 takes several hours and can be tiring, but this entire region offers spectacular views, and if you plan your journey ahead, here are just some of the places you can visit along the way. The Hoover Dam, constructed over 60 years ago and still one of the major tourist spots in the United States. Lake Mead, situated on the outskirts of Las Vegas and a magnet for both boating and fishing enthusiasts alike, though the fish here don't seem like too much competition. Red Rock Canyon, less than 40 minutes drive from Las Vegas, takes visitors on a one-way road system through some of the most dramatic mountain scenery imaginable. Finally, the main road northwest from Las Vegas continues in a straight line for hour upon hour, until suddenly one reaches a distinctive road sign. We're just 2 hours drive outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, temperatures in the mid-60s, and we're here. at the very start of the extraterrestrial highway 375. Just 40 miles down the road, the Little Ailey Inn and the town of Rachel. Before that, however, we've a short stop to make at Area 51. Further down the highway, the horizon suddenly expands to include three notable landmarks. Away in the distance, the extraterrestrial highway continues on to eventually reach the small town of Rachel, home of the Little Ailey Inn. Away to the left and in the distance, a dirt track which winds its way to the perimeter bordering Area 51. And here, a distant shot of the Steve Medlin Ranch, about which we're about to hear more. This is the Steve Medlin mailbox, about 20 miles from Rachel, Nevada. Over there is Area 51. A few years ago, this mailbox was painted black. It was a mailbox identified by a gentleman known as Robert Scott Lazar as being on the route to Area 51, a place where he allegedly worked, and back in 1989 came forth and said that the place that he worked, out near Groom Lake, was back engineering alien technology. Well, the farmer Steve Medlin got a little bit cheesed off with people coming along and defacing his mailbox, so he painted it white. Within a few days somebody had come along and painted it black again. Well, it's a year since we were last out here, but as you can see, the scribes have been busy. All manner of little signatures and the like have been scribbled on top of Steve Medlin's mailbox, and I can see from England, from Ireland, from all over the place. Either way, this is a mailbox that is legendary in UFO folklore. Long may it continue to be so. From the mailbox, it's a long and dusty drive that takes visitors to a point in the road where one can proceed no further. Yes, the perimeter of Area 51 itself. There are no barriers here, railings or guard towers, but warning signs make it abundantly clear that to proceed further could result in a hefty fine, or worse, the use of deadly force. On nearby hills, motion detectors stand out against blue skies. Some say they can even detect smells. Our visit that day didn't escape the attention of nearby security guards, often referred to as the camo dudes. Well, here we are at Area 51, the perimeter range, and in behind me you can actually see one of the so-called camo dudes, the security guards that patrol this perimeter, taking a close look at what we're doing. It's a case of us watching them, watching us, watching them, or something like that. But they're there. Take a look for yourself. After returning to the white mailbox, our journey along the extraterrestrial highway eventually brings us to a small town that is featured in countless magazines and television documentaries worldwide. We're now some 3 hours outside of Las Vegas, here in Rachel, Nevada, home of the Little Ailey Inn, some might say the UFO capital of the world. Once inside the Little Ailey Inn, visitors are greeted by owners Joe and Pat Travis, whose menu for the famished include alien burgers. The walls here are bedecked with numerous photographs of well-known personalities who have paid a visit to this remote part of Nevada. But whether this particular couple did so is another matter. It's not just UFO enthusiasts who drop in from time to time. It seems that RAF pilots, probably participating in a red flag exercise at Groom Lake, were keen to eyeball this UFO landmark for themselves. Talking of which, we couldn't help but hear the thunderous noise from military jet aircraft overhead. These images demonstrate two things. Firstly, that military aircraft are regular visitors to the skies above Rachel. Secondly, when seen at night, imagine what the untrained eye would make of these two aircraft hurtling across distant mountain tops at incredible speeds. Even allowing for a strong military presence, aviation and defence experts have yet to explain these astonishing objects, filmed in broad daylight several years ago by Englishman Ray Wardle, looking out in the direction of Area 51. Are these the strange and mysterious craft constructed from back-engineered alien technology, or highly advanced unmanned drones? Perhaps there are UFOs at Area 51, but of a type some prefer to label as unconventional flying objects. The name of George Adamski was once on everyone's lips during the 1950s and early 60s. Of all the so-called contactees, Adamski's claim to fame was augmented by what many consider today to be poorly faked flying saucer footage taken at the time. Certainly, on first viewing, these images understandably attract bouts of laughter. But what if we were to study them through the modern computer? Surely today's technology would easily locate any signs of a hoax. That's precisely what film and photo analyst Russell Callahan set out to achieve.
One of the fascinating things about modern technology and the availability that the normal man like myself can afford to use the technology that really has only been available to film studios, television producers for many, many years, is that when something like the Adamski footage, which has long been a pet favourite of myself, can be studied very carefully, then from what people used to laugh at many, many years ago, and have been laughing for probably 30 years, we can actually look at it and find that there's something a little bit more substantial to than what we first see. These are actually proof prints from the original film that Madeline Roddifer and George Adamski filmed back in the 60s. Now, a very high contrast on the film. It was very difficult to see any detail in the object. As you can see on the film, it looks like black shadows, which led people to speculate that probably this was just a hoax, maybe a cardboard cutout, maybe something on a piece of string, the bright light bleaching any signs of string or wires out of the shot. But Bill Sherwood, very clever man, worked for Kodak, light blasted some of the frames and came up with images like this. Now, something that's been scoffed for 30 odd years, all of a sudden, and let's just say that Bill Sherwood did this some 30 years ago, but it's only now that the technology has been available we can actually see these are the same frames. This is the same footage that we're looking at here. This is a genuine frame from that footage. Look at the detail. It's a three-dimensional object. It's no drawing and it's no painting. It's a solid object of 3 dimensions. The thing that Bill Sherwood managed to do was get an accurate measurement on it. And by going back to where Madeline Roddifer lived and where George Adamski filmed the actual sighting from, determined that the object we were looking at could be no less than 27 feet across. Now that, if it's a model, is quite amazing. There's a lot more footage like this to be looked at. But don't just scoff when somebody shows you something and says this is a flying saucer. Who knows what it is? But maybe it's not a hoax.
Someone who is convinced that some of George Adamski's footage is perfectly genuine is leading British UFO researcher and best-selling author Timothy Good, who recently granted us this interview about his latest work, Alien Base. Now, we've had numerous accounts throughout the book, Alien Base, where people have come forward and claimed to have spoken and interacted, if you will, with extraterrestrials, but none more fantastic, I suppose, than a certain gentleman who was a former equerry to the Queen.
Yeah, right. Air Marshal Sir Peter Horsley, yes. I mean, this is an incredible story, but, you know, someone like that who is so credible, I interviewed him, he must have been very highly vetted to get the job of equerry to the Queen and Prince Philip. He's flown 90 different types of aircraft, from the Spitfire to the Vulcan bomber, Deputy Chief of Strike Command, for heaven's sakes. You can't get much higher than that. And here's a man who insists that he met an apparently extraterrestrial human being with whom who was able to read his mind. He didn't have to formulate his questions with his voice. The questions were answered for him. How can we dismiss stories like that? We can dismiss Adamski and Menger if you like, but I don't think we can dismiss someone like him.
One obvious question surfaces. He's talking about extraordinary events from the mid-50s. It's taken him the best part of 45 years to come forward, albeit through his autobiography, to recount these details. What explanation did he give you when you personally interviewed the man?
Well, first of all, he didn't give me an explanation, and I didn't ask him. I said to him, it's very brave of you to come out with this story, Sir Peter, and he said, it's not brave, I simply recount what happened. But I am assuming, I didn't feel the need to answer the question, I am assuming that there's no way he could have come out with that story publicly when he was serving, at Buckingham Palace. There's no way he could have come out with such a story while acting as Deputy Chief of Strike Command or flying Vulcan bombers, for heaven's sakes. So it's only in his retirement that he's felt the freedom to come forward.
But even so, I mean, assuming, for instance, that the man retired at 60 or indeed 65, we're still talking about 15 to 20 years for him to impart that information. Well, doesn't that strike you as odd? Well,
to impart it publicly, it doesn't strike me as odd, no. I've come across many other people. Even the contactee whom I refer to as Joelle, whom I've known since 1952, didn't even want me to write up her story after her death, and she died a few years ago. So in a certain sense, I'm acting against her last wishes.
Something extraordinary appears to be taking place in the skies throughout our planet. But on what scale? And should governments be concerned? Well, it's highly likely that governments are extremely concerned over the UFO issue, but for reasons best known to them, are not prepared to admit to such concerns publicly. But as long as these strange and mysterious objects continue to enter our airspace with impunity, so long as ordinary members of the public continue to be nonplussed by these events, we will continue to question and probe, and hopefully come up with some of the answers.